Hello and a very warm welcome to this fourth episode on economic impact of climate change with respect to India. In this fourth episode, which is very important from the examination point of view, we are going to discuss comprehensively the climate change impact on India. I hope you are already watching the videos of this series, which will help you to understand and connect the concepts much better. So in the previous video, we did the climate change impact on a global scale. Now we are narrowing our focus and we are going to see the climate change impact on India. This is important for both prelim and main examination, mainly because the latest IPCC report was released, which was released in 3 volumes. So the last volume was released in March of 2022. And then in March of 2023, the IPCC is coming up with a new synthesis report, which is likely to be a synthesis plus update of the 3 volumes of the assessment report 3 and definitely certain updates. Given that this topic becomes important for all the levels of the civil service examination, prelim, mains, and also for an occasional question in the interview. So in this video, I have tried to cover the things as comprehensively as possible so that you get to know about the climate change impact on India, all the information that you need for the examination at one place. So make sure that you are watching this video until the end so that no important point escapes your notice. And here we go. There are two parts in which I am going to discuss today's topics. First, what does the assessment report 6 say about Asia? So that we know a little immediate context. What is the prediction for the Asian region in totality, and then we will try to place India. Definitely the predictions for Asia I have kept very brief, and the predictions for India I have dealt with it as elaborately as possible because of its importance for your examination. Let us start with the predictions for Asia, and there are 5 key consequences which IPCC is talking about Asia. And it includes everything from ecosystem to economy to human health and everything. So first thing that it says that because of flooding in coastal cities and settlements, there will be massive damage to urban infrastructure, and then it will be causing human well-being and health. Needless to say, it is going to worsen the situation of climate migration and the situation of climate refugees. In the previous video, we spoke about climate refugees, a set of people who are forced to be displaced from their original place of residence, original place of their occupation because of climate change impact, which was beyond the coping capacity of their community. In Asia, there is a likelihood of sea level rise more than the global average, given the fact that the Indian Ocean region is warming a little faster than the rest of the ocean. Besides, there is one more complicating fact that is not mentioned in this slide, but you should know that in Asian region, there are so many coastal settlements which are very low lying. So even at moderate sea level rise, these coastal regions which are low lying will be submerged, and that will be causing massive economic and infrastructure damage and cost to human health and also human well-being. Second thing it talks about is biodiversity loss and habitat shifts. So first it says that it will be disrupting freshwater ecosystem mainly because of glacial shrinking and disruptions in the monsoon. Second, land ecosystem. The land ecosystems are likely to face many disruptions. For example, repeat forest fires, changing pattern of rain will also be altering the basic dynamics of land ecosystem, so on. And ocean ecosystem will be suffering from warming of the water, from acidification of water, and also shifts in heat distribution within the oceanic body. It will be impacting those human systems, economic systems, etc., which are depending on these ecosystem services. Think of several types of farming activity, including fishing. Next, it talks about the risk at coral risk at coral reef level. So it is now estimated that the coral reef in the Asian region is the most threatened group of coral reef. So in the Asian region, because acidification as well as the oceanic warming is happening faster than the global average, so the coral reef is very much threatened in this area. Not to say that coral reef is not threatened in other parts of the world, but here the level of threat is higher. It is showing as extensive bleaching and also coral mortality. There are 5 factors which have caused this, and I have organized it in a manner that will be easy for you to study, grasp, and later recall. So, the factors which are there: warming of the ocean, acidification of the ocean, rise in sea level, then marine heat waves, and extensive resource extraction. All of these are happening, but these four, the first four, are directly related to climate change impact. Now we come to the fourth one, and it says that coastal fishery resources are expected to decline because of the sea level rise and because of increased temperature. So, on one hand, it will be impacting occupation of a very big community in the Asian region, which depends on fishing as the primary economic activity. It will also be impacting the food security situation because in the world, fish is the most commonly consumed, most widely consumed animal protein, and compared to other animal proteins, fish is more economical, especially in the coastal area. Given that, it will be impacting the protein level food security in so many parts of Asia, and it will be hitting the poorer people much harder. Next is the increased risk to food and water security. First, temperature extremes will be impacting the agroecological systems. Rainfall variability भी agroecological system को impact करेगी, but it is also going to impact the availability of water. Floods are happening much more unpredictably, much more massively at times, and same can be said about droughts. Droughts are happening more frequently, so there are certain parts which are getting impacted by floods. There are certain parts which are getting impacted by droughts. Either way, there will be destruction of a standing crop, and also there is going to be a scarcity of water in case of drought. So these are the 5 key consequences that the IPCC 6th assessment report projects about the Asian region, and these projections have been made, just in case you missed it, for near to medium term, not far into the long term, but these are the changes which are likely to be seen if nothing corrective is done. Then they are likely to be seen over a horizon of about 50 to 80 years. So impacts are pretty much staring into the eyes of the Asian community. Now let us come to the much more important part, and this part is much more elaborate also. That is the prediction for India. Earlier, as I said, that impact for India is very important for the prelim as well as main examination, and you should not be surprised if a couple of questions get asked in the interview also for the next few years, given the fact that 6th assessment report is going to remain the latest IPCC assessment report for at least 5-6 years to come. Now, let us start with the predictions for India. Before we get into the sectoral predictions, here are the things which make India especially vulnerable to be one of the worst impacted countries. So India is likely to be one of the worst impacted countries, and there are 5 reasons behind it. And like always, I have broken the information into clean points so that you can grasp this information fast and you can retain it for your examination. If needed, you can always pause the video to quickly make your note. I can assure you that no other source will be giving you such a comprehensive coverage on climate change impact on India in totality. So be sure that you are making notes if you need to make notes. Okay. So there are 5 reasons which make India especially vulnerable to climate change impact and which make India more likely to be among the worst hit by climate change. First and foremost, India is going to be impacted because of its tropical location. Because the predictions are there that the tropical countries are going to witness heat waves much more than rest of the world. Tropical countries are going to have disturbances in rainfall pattern much more. Tropical countries are going to see the glacial melting much more. And tropical countries are also going to witness drought and flood randomness much more than the rest of the world. So tropical location itself makes India particularly vulnerable. Second thing is the long coastline of India, which makes India particularly vulnerable to seawater ingression, sea submergence of some of the low-lying coastal area, destruction of coastal agricultural and other kind of farming activities, and also ingression of salt water, destroying the freshwater availability, freshwater resources in the coastal areas. So long coastline also makes India particularly vulnerable. Then high dependence on glaciers and monsoon. Some of the most important Indian rivers are glacial rivers, and much of the agriculture in our country depends on monsoon. And no matter how hard we want, how hard we wish, there is no way around it. So, given the fact that the glaciers are melting, and in the next few slides, we are going to talk about that also. So, given the fact that the glaciers are melting, monsoon is going to be erratic, our agriculture is going to be impacted very badly. And when we talk about agriculture being impacted, it is not only going to affect food security in our country, it is also going to drive the rural demand for different goods and services to a much lower level. And that is going to have economy wide impact because much of the Indian industry survives on rural and suburban demands. So if the rural demand falls, there is going to be a wider impact on the economy, and rural demand is likely to fall if our agricultural sector is going to be hit. Low income, that is an undeniable fact about India, and low income makes India's options towards adaptation at both at community level and as a nation rather narrow, and that will be impacting India worse. And then at the level of government also, there is always a limitation of resources. So we are not going to be among those countries which adopt newer green technology much faster. We are not going to be one of those countries which take adaptation measures very aggressively or mitigation measures very ambitiously. So these are some of the factors which we have to keep in mind when we are talking about the overall impact. So if in the main to some other question, if you are asked to give this add-on information, enumerate those factors which make India especially vulnerable to climate change impact, these are your 5 points. Now let us go for the sectoral survey. So first and foremost, we are talking about the sea level rise. So we are going to see that when the sea level rises in our country, so there are some large and dense urban centers like Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata that will be either submerged, not the entire city. I mean, I'm not predicting anything catastrophic or dramatic as many of the movies would want to show it like. But what I'm trying to say that there would be some low-lying parts in these cities which may get submerged, and there would be some part which will be facing regular flooding. This is one of the impact. And then IPCC says that by 2050, close to 3.5 crore people would be impacted by annual coastal flooding. And by the end of the century, this number can rise to 4.5 to 5 crore. So 3.5 crore people getting impacted by coastal flooding or ingression of seawater in the coastal areas is quite a big number for internal displacement. And we do not yet know how and when we are going to face this situation, and but sometime by 2050, and we do not yet know how we are going to deal with it. And then the cost for it, and that too direct cost, is going to be in the range of 24 to 36 billion, but this might very well be an underestimate. Now moving to the next impact, that will be heat wave. You can very well recall the heat wave starting pretty early in the middle of March in 2022, and then it lasted until the onset of monsoon shower. This was the impact of heat wave, that several thousand people lost their life in India and Pakistan. The greater number of mortality was experienced in India, and it also impacted the per hectare uh, tonnage, per hectare output of wheat standing crop for 2021-22 cultivation season. So heat wave is likely to be more frequent, likely to be more intense, and this will be affecting human health, especially for the elderly and poor. Why poor? Number one, by having low income, they do not have much choice about cooling their places of inhabitation. And second, most of the poor are forced to work outdoors in the agricultural fields, in the construction sector, which makes them directly exposed to extreme daytime heat during the heat wave months. Therefore, they are more likely to be impacted. And we are talking about increase in both frequency as well as intensity. And the report also says that heat wave in India have already become more frequent and intense. And an example in case will be the example of 2022. Moving next, water scarcity is also something which confronts India. Already 33% of our population is facing water scarcity. That means one third of Indian population is facing water scarcity. And IPCC says that around 40% population may be facing water scarcity by the year 2050. The reason is, first and foremost, that in the major river basins, there will be lesser supply of water. This will be impacting agriculture, and through impacting agriculture, it will be impacting food security. It will also be impacting the availability of drinking water, because if there is less water in the rivers, then all of these three things are going to happen. Apart from that, these river basins, they support close to 70 crore people of our country. That is close to half of India's population. So this half of India's population is going to see less than usual level of agricultural production that will put their food security under question mark. Apart from that, they are also going to face water scarcity. What do you think will happen then? And frequency and severity of droughts is also likely to increase. So that is the situation for water scarcity. So if you notice, up until now, what I have done, I have picked up a theme and I have brought all the important point under that theme at one place, so that no matter how the main examination plays with the question, you're always ready to handle that question. So I have not just given you a simple list of climate change impact on India. I have divided it into as many headings, relevant headings as possible. And then under those headings, I have tried to bring all the relevant information so that you do not have to look for any other source after finishing this video. And this video is not going to take much time either. Now we come to monsoon rainfall, and we already know that monsoon rainfall is changing in our country. Late onset of monsoon is one of the features. Then erratic nature of monsoon is another feature. Monsoon is staying till quite late is yet another feature that we are seeing in our country. Erratic nature of monsoon is very much causing unexpected floods in several parts of the country, and it is also leading to drought in several other parts of the country. So on one hand, more frequent and severe floods, and also droughts. And drought is going to worsen the water scarcity situation. And monsoon is crucial to India's agriculture. You don't need to be told that, and economy. And that ways, the change in monsoon is first going to hit the agriculture sector, And with agriculture sector being hit, it will be hitting rural employment scenario, rural demand, and overall food security. And the report projects that India can experience up to 10% decrease in monsoon rainfall by the end of the century, and about 6% decrease is expected if the corrective steps are not taken. Then 6% decrease is expected by the middle of the century itself. So that is about monsoon. Agricultural output is likely to fall. There will be several contributing factors. So India is the most vulnerable country in terms of potential loss for crop protection production. So that is a very important factual point. According to IPCC, India is going to suffer loss of crop production much more than most other countries of the world. Now, the yield of rice, wheat, pulses, and coarse cereals will be reduced by 9% by 2050 compared to the current level. A 9% reduction means a lot. It will be directly hitting India's food security, India's buffer stock, food price, and inflation scenario, so on. And why this is going to happen? Four factors. First and foremost, erratic nature of monsoon that will be causing random floods in such areas where there should be no flood, and intense drought. Second is heat wave, because there are a number of important crop species which are quite sensitive to high temperature. And mind it, heat wave often comes uh, along with drought. So there will be less water availability in the soil, and at the same time, the plant will be under heat wave. So that will be killing a lot of plants, especially if they are at some delicate stage of their growth. So the second factor is heat wave. The third factor is, with the change in climate, there is a likelihood of surge in a number of plant pathogens like fungi and all, especially if monsoon showers are happening till late and all. So this will be creating favorable condition for several plant pathogens, especially the fungal pathogens growth that will be impacting the standing crop. Last but not the least, the insect pests attack will also be more frequent, which is already happening in our country. So these are four very important reasons. And I have not yet counted that manpower engaged in agricultural activities will find it increasingly hard to work in the farm given the daytime temperature touching a very high level. So that is also a factor to be considered. And if that happens, then obviously there is going to be impact on food security in our country, and especially the rural poor will be facing a situation where their poverty will be worsening. And those industries which depend on agricultural commodities, those industries are also going to be hit very hard. Now we come to lower fishing output. Lower fishing output is going to happen because of a number of factors. First and foremost, we are going to see a rise in the sea level, which will be making fishing a little risky affair. Second, warming of the ocean, acidification of the ocean, and also change in the heat distribution will be pushing the fishes farther away from the coast, and that will be very unfeasible to fish. Those fishes will be very unfeasible to be caught and brought into the market. And the next factor that can also impact fishing is extreme weather phenomena like cyclones and all, which will make fishing a rather hazardous activity. All of these factors have to be considered, and you can imagine that fishing output will be lower. Earlier in the video, we have already spoken that the fishes happen to be most consumed animal protein in the world, and given the fact that they are also very affordable, so protein level food security will be impacted. Moving next, the Himalayan glaciers. So first and foremost, the glaciers have already lost more than 15% of their mass since 1970s. So Himalayan glaciers are already shrinking. And the estimation is that the glaciers could lose up to two-thirds of their remaining mass by the end of the century. And if that happens, then both in India and neighboring countries, there will be significant impact on water availability that will be hitting both the supply of drinking water and supply of water for domestic use and supply of water for irrigation. That is about Himalayan glacier situation. Extreme weather events we have already spoken about, such as cyclones, which will have severe impact on coastal communities and both eastern and western coast, but eastern coast happens to be far more vulnerable to intense cyclones historically also. And these regions are already highly vulnerable to extreme weather events. Moving next, the marine ecosystems are also going to face damage because of sea level rise, oceanic warming, and the change in heat distribution and all that. So what happens that coral reefs will be damaged, and they are most productive among the marine ecosystems. So these ecosystems will be getting destroyed, and that way the entire food chain within the oceanic ecosystem will be altered. And that can have impact on the survival of the fishes, survival of lot of species. So on that count, we are looking at not only loss of fishery resources, but we are also looking at the loss of marine biodiversity. These are all India specific predictions. Then reduced labor productivity due to high temperature. So we have already spoken about the heat wave, and many areas will be experiencing high humidity and high temperature. And wet bulb temperature are projected to exceed 31 degree centigrade. So when we talk about wet bulb temperature, we are basically keeping two variables in mind. Number one is temperature, number two is humidity. So as long as the temperature is at a level where perspiration and all will keep you cool, so that will be indicating a lower wet bulb temperature. But then there is a certain limit to it. We are coming to that. So when the wet bulb temperature increases, it will make outdoor heavy labor a hazardous activity, like in agricultural field, at construction sites and all. And it is projected that all the parts of India will be experiencing high wet bulb temperature. So what is wet bulb temperature? It is the lowest temperature to which air can be cooled by evaporation of water into air. So it is that temperature where air can still be cooled, right? So you are exposed to hot air. Now your body will perspire, and this sweat will eventually be evaporated, and you will be having a little bit of cooling effect. So what is that lowest temperature where air can still be cooled by perspiration? After that, air cannot further be cooled. Okay, so that is wet bulb temperature. So you measure the wet bulb temperature by factoring heat and humidity level both. And if the wet bulb temperature reaches 35 degrees Celsius, that is the highest point, it means humans can no longer lose internal body heat by sweating. Right. Now the point is that cities like Lucknow and Patna will be experiencing very high wet bulb temperature, that is the upper limit of 35 degrees centigrade, if pollution level continues to increase the way it is. And then lot of other cities and regions, Bhubaneswar, Chennai, Mumbai, Indore, Ahmedabad also, and the Vidarbha region also is going to experience wet bulb temperature at 32 degrees centigrade to 34 degree centigrade. And this will be leading to more heat related death and reduced productivity. And if you use air conditioners and all to cope with the heat, so it will require a lot of energy, and it will lead to power outages and all of these. So now you very well understand the impact of rising wet bulb temperature, how it is going to impact not only outdoor labor, but also human health and eventually the power demand. We are now moving to economic impact, and economic impact will be uh, multifaceted, and this is the main theme of this entire series. And from the next video, you are actually going to see the economic impact of climate change. But among the major economic impact, agriculture and food security will be impacted. The productivity of human resource is also going to be impacted. Then the industries which depend on natural raw material, those industries are going to be impacted. And then other sectors such as tourism and energy, they are also going to be impacted. And the cost can go in several trillion dollars. So that is the economic impact. Then two more facets: increased inequality and social stress, because climate change is going to worsen the existing inequalities in India, particularly the poor, women, and the children. They are among the most vulnerable and they have the least coping capacity for variety of societal factors. Then urban India is also very vulnerable to extreme weather event, and that can face increased risk from climate change with respect to flooding and heat wave. Then the people who are resource poor and relatively disempowered, they will be disproportionately impacted by the consequences, like I said in the very first point only. And dependence of such communities on the state is likely to increase. But remember, state capacity is uneven and limited. From region to region, the state capacity will be differing. And as such, given the enormity of the challenge, the state capacity is perhaps not enough. Now we are coming to the impact on ecosystems and biodiversity. That is the 14th theme in this discussion. So it will be impacting ecosystems. We have already seen the Himalayan glacial ecosystem. We have already seen marine ecosystem, but this is a compilation of all the ecosystem and biodiversity impact. So in mountainous area, coastal area, and island ecosystem, all of them are likely to be impacted within our country. The sixth assessment report says that climate change is likely to cause changes in the distribution and abundance of plant and animal species, and several of these species will be finding the changed environmental condition unsuitable for their survival, and they face a risk of extinction. Not only that, in the next slide you are going to see that the climate change impact has increased the episodes of forest fire within India also, and that is destroying vast regions of forest and the biological diversity that depends upon these forests. So the report highlights the importance of forest, which provide important ecosystem service like carbon sequestration, soil conservation, and water regulation. And they are home to rich biodiversity of plant and animal species. And climate change will lead to changes in forest composition and structure and will increase the risk of forest fires and also insect outbreaks. That ways the forest diversity will be impacted. And the report also notes that India's marine ecosystem, including coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrass meadows, are at risk because of warming waters, ocean acidification, and sea level rise, and can have significant impact on India's wildlife and biodiversity because of the direct impact on the quality and continuity of the habitat. So these are the 14 themes under which climate change impact on India can be and should be studied. Now it is up to you to make its best use for your prelim and the main examination. And that is very much all in this video. In this video, we are not talking about the policy options available for India, the policy options already exercised by India. That will be the subject matter of further discussion in this series. Up next in this series, Anand Sir is going to talk about the climate change impact on Indian economy. So the impact on economy is going to be dealt in depth by Anand sir. And finally, we will be talking about the policy options which are available to India and some of the policy options which have been exercised by India. So that is all. I hope you are liking this series and you are finding this series useful to your preparation. Till we meet again, goodbye and good luck to all of you. And thank you very much for watching.